and it was every day we were waiting and hearing, this shut down and that shut down, and WrestleMania was still going to happen. Ultimately, it did. It was just much, much different. So once we finally shut down, we were catching up to where the rest of the world was, 3 weeks prior. And I found myself in this void of not drawing things. What I do at Atomic as a project manager is part art director, part technical designer, part, I don't like the word engineer because I don't have letters after my name, but redneck backyard engineer, make sure it's strong enough, and then call the real engineers when you need to double check that. And part roadie. I go out with most of the shows that I manage and make sure they get installed correctly, at least the first time, if they're a tour, for example, or a lot of what we do are one night only events. So load it in, do the show, load it out, sleep later. So half of my time in the shop is spent drawing things and managing how those drawn set pieces get then drafted and detailed out so that they can be built in the primary fabrication in our shop. And then I manage that workflow within the shop, getting things built, and then continue on with that outside our facility, because we don't put any shows on in our facility. So, whatever venue it ultimately goes to, that's where it goes. When we shut down, I found myself, like I said, just kind of in this void of not drawing things for 8 to 14 hours a day. So I guess I should start my screen share. So I drew, let's play. Everybody can see my screen, I think. So I drew a spice rack because I was just desperate to draw and make something. And this was my descent into madness of not having anything to do. I really love working with metal. I do a lot of folded metal. And so, of course, I folded my little spice rack out of metal. And then I decided, well, I've killed 2 days now with this little spice rack. Let's do something else. Started making little fun titanium keychains. Just needed to draw something. So I decided to get some laser cut pieces and make some keychains. And of course, once you make a keychain, you've got to make a bottle opener. And then, just kept trying to find things that people wanted to do. So somebody said, oh, I really want a finger labyrinth. I said, I have no idea what that is, but I love drawing circles. So I made a really neat little finger labyrinth, and then painted the garage and all those other things. Thankfully, we started getting back to work at Atomic. So we've been fortunate that it's feast and famine right now. With events, there's a lot of streamed events, and there are a lot of big events that are produced in a different way right now. Traditionally, our background is from television. So back in the 80s and 90s, we did a lot of MTV, we did a lot of Viacom properties, those sorts of things. And then we started getting into one-off kind of music events, live events, like Farm Aid back in the 90s, Woodstock 92, those sorts of things. And then nowadays, everybody wants rock and roll production. They want something to show up in one day, look amazing. So that on the right there with the Hulu up front, everybody wants to wow people with these big keynotes and corporate presentations. So we do a lot of that as well. We've got a really diverse client base. So there's a lot of different ways I go about doing my job, depending on who we're talking with. So right now, thankfully, we still have an office in Frankfurt. It is still getting lots of jobs because they've been able to reopen periodically and close down and reopen. But primarily, we're based out of Lidditz, Pennsylvania, and we have a warehouse in LA. Those are our two primary locations. All these other locations are either like rental agreements or satellite offices, sort of thing. We build stuff for live events. So it could be that we are getting a completely thought out design from an external designer, and they just want us to execute that vision and build it to the best of our ability. That normally doesn't have any kind of engineering done in advance. So good designers don't let pesky little things like physics get in their way. It's our job to apply the physics and make sure that the thing can stand up safely and load in quickly and all these other requirements of physically existing objects in the world. Sometimes the producer will come to us with kind of a cocktail napkin sketch, and then it's our job to work with them back and forth to art direct that, you know, flesh it out, and still apply physics and get it built and loaded in the venue. And then sometimes we get a call that they don't have any idea and they want us to just do the design for them, be their design firm. And then sometimes that's on my shoulders. Oftentimes, thankfully, we have a dedicated design division in addition to kind of the scene shop. So I can outsource a lot of that more pure design work to our designers. And, you know, I'll work with them kind of as the art director sort of relationship, and then back up to the client. I'm going to run through this slideshow as kind of our, like, here's who we are at Atomic slideshow. I don't want it to feel like an ad for Atomic. There's a lot of shops out there. It's a fairly large industry, but it's also surprisingly like a tight-knit community, I would say. So later in this, I talk about Rock Lidditz. There's a consortium of companies that all kind of came together on a campus in Lidditz, and that's a really good microcosm of the wider industry. Every company that's in the Rock Lidditz campus, there are dozens and dozens of those companies around the country and around the world that do the same thing and all speak kind of a common language. And that is just production, getting stuff done quickly and looking good. So first and foremost, we really love collaborating. Theater is very, very collaborative. My background, you know, you go to the first reading as a designer, you meet the cast, or if you're lucky enough to work on original works, you meet with the playwright and really talk through, you know, a concept and a vision and all of that. A lot of people who are in the live events world come from that background of collaborative design. So even though I don't necessarily work for a producer, I know a lot of them and I know their background, and we really like bouncing ideas off each other, and we really like opening night, getting it done. It's very cathartic to work on something for 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks at tops, and you know, get it loaded in. It's on TV, everybody loves it, and then we get it loaded out. Sometimes we store it for the next year, sometimes we recycle it. All depends. So this is kind of the work of our more pure design division, where we've got a rendering down at the bottom, up at the top, and the real show down below. That's at Madison Square Garden's theater, which we call the mail slot, because it's a very short, wide theater. So everything winds up being super wide in there. Here's just a progression of like rough doodles. You know, how do you design a rock and roll show? The same way you design everything else. You sketch it out, or you doodle until you like something and you show somebody and they hate it or they love it, and you work with what works and you throw away what doesn't. This is that progression. And we get a lot of, from corporate entities, we get kind of mood boards. There's a lot more, this is going to sound like a negative, but designed by committee. And that is, you know, there's an executive who's in charge, and they are being fed visuals and inspiration things and kind of picking from that. And then either their team of designers or our team of designers will synthesize that into a thing. So this in particular was for a pop-up shoe store in Lower Manhattan. So we built this shoebox. It's all video tiles and interactive. That was the exterior of the pop-up store, and then inside there was a magical shoe delivery system and, you know, little art pieces and whatnot, homage to the great shoes. And it went in 3 days. I think there were 4 days of events, and then it disappeared overnight. That's that rock and roll production everybody's looking for. And then there's like kind of our bread and butter award shows, Emmys, Grammys, Tonys, if it ends in E's. we've probably done it recently. This is the VMAs from a couple years back at Radio City. The clouds up here, I don't know if my mouse is visible, it's not. The kind of clouds of swoopy shapes, that upper left image is what we got from the client. And we worked with them back and forth trying to say, okay, what are these things? Lighting and video and all that good stuff. What can the building actually support? Because Radio City isn't really meant to have this much stuff out in the house. There are not many places you can pick up stuff out in the house in Radio City. And then, just see it through to fruition. In addition to that, there was kind of a B stage that was out in the house. Again, not really designed as a facility to have that, but they wanted this giant moon man. And it went from this kind of laminated sketch thing to, and I forgot that, there was a cage dancer in a very early version of it. And then kind of a fleshed out version with neon, and then it kind of devolved to only be the neon with this kind of grid work behind it. And as we're guiding these things, so much of the design directive is make it look cool. So we just have to keep playing with it and using what we have at our disposal, which I think from cradle to grave for this Moonman project, we probably had 3 weeks total. So what do we have on the shelf? Who do we know who has something else on the shelf? Those sorts of things, and work within those constraints when they're not going to postpone the VMAs because we couldn't get the right kind of LED neon as much as I ask them to every year. And then there are just ancillary events around bigger events, so red carpets and whatnot. And this is one where we designed it, we produced it, and we built it, loaded it in California. And then this is kind of just the story of us building stuff. This is that moon man. In this picture, there's probably only 2/3 of the shop. We're missing our soft goods shop, and we're missing a lot of temporary labor to get all this stuff built. During the busy times, we would have probably 3 shows on the floor at any given time, and up to 20 in the pipeline. So 3 shows a week shipping was pretty common. Busy times would be 7, 8, 9 shows a week coming out of our facility. And that's could be for a one-off, could be for a TV show on cable, could be for an activation. So this is just a brand activation that we did one Christmas season for Chase Bank. We did a bunch of flagship windows in Manhattan where they wanted an interactive, you go up and touch the window and then the light tubes respond to your touch and makes fun noises and things. So, how to figure out, there's a lot of rules around loading things into a bank. So working around those constraints and then, getting it in, making sure it's robust enough to run for 3 weeks unattended relatively, those sorts of challenges. And for a lot of these things where it's interactive or there's programming involved, we have to outsource and work with partner firms to get that sort of thing off the ground quickly. We have a lot of in-house capabilities, but when it comes to, we need it to be turnkey and show up and work for 3 weeks without crashing. We want to make sure that somebody else has accountability there as well. There's a fun trade show booth we did a couple of years back for IBM for their health division. Example of some of the load-in drawings we would do for that. So every little piece and part is drawn to and modeled to the nth degree. We draw everything down to the nut and bolt, every screw, every hole, everything. Part of that is if we need to do it again, we want to know how we did it the first time. That happens pretty often. And then the other part is we automate a lot of our construction. So a lot of these parts come off of our CNC tables. That's a pretty common way for everybody to build everything nowadays, all computer controlled, computer milled, computer everything. So the more realistic we can model it at the front end, the more successful it is at the back end, and the faster you can really build it. We have a surprisingly small full-time carpentry shop staff for as much that we build out of wood, because we can just put together little kits, or big kits in most cases, that go together like IKEA furniture, but super custom. Yeah. So this is a big gala we do every year at the Javits Center in New York. It's called Robin Hood. No affiliation with the Game Stonks trading app. And every year they have some grandiose theme. It's a giant sit-down dinner where they raise something like $34 million a year just at this one sit-down dinner. And this year's theme was like geometry and school stuff. So, you know, geometric shapes, this giant calculator. There's an example of how we got that built. All of these subcomponents you might not be able to see depending on the compression, but everywhere you see a little line in that reveal on the side, that's a CNC part. It's all uniquely programmed, and you know, we have a staff of 14 in the project management department that draw all this stuff and make sure it's right, and then make sure when it gets built, anything we messed up in the computer, which happens a lot, you know, fix it on the fly kind of thing. Thankfully, you know, we've got really good, in addition to having those CNC tables that can just cut it exactly how you told it to, we got really great fabricators in our metal shops and wood shops, so that when it comes out like we told it to, and that's not the right way, they can usually work around our mistakes. And there it is, actually loaded in. I'll back up a couple of, you know, there's the rendering, and there it is, loaded in. So this is that Rock Lidditz community I was talking about. We've got a campus just at the north edge of Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is, you know, north of Lancaster, if you don't know. And it used to be a farm, and it was derelict, and a couple of the major entertainment firms in Lidditz that have been around since the 60s and 70s partnered together to buy it and ultimately start putting buildings on it. So they've got a really big rehearsal studio you may have heard of, because like Beyonce and whoever else comes through sometimes. We're not supposed to talk about that. It's not actually Beyonce. That's just our code word for every famous person. So it's a giant rehearsal space that allows for mainly music tours. So Beyonce might come through with her staging and her lighting rig and her sound rig and her crew and rehearse. And it's not just rehearsing the dance routines and the vocals, it's rehearsing that load in so that it can build quickly, rehearsing the interconnect to make sure it's all debugged before you get there to that first arena. And the facility itself is designed to be large enough and have enough capacity where if it fits in that big black box out in a cornfield, then it will fit in any venue in North America. It's the only one of its kind in North America. There's a similar concept in Europe, and we can fit in most venues in Europe too, if you need to. And it's the traditional way of doing this sort of thing. It's the rehearsal is not a unique idea. That's always been happening. But you have to rent out an arena, and that's a night the arena can't sell those seats. So it's very expensive because they would rather sell seats and sell beer and hot dogs than host a tech rehearsal for your tour. So it's a little less expensive. It's a little bit off the beaten path, which is nice. And there's a hotel directly across the parking lot that's quite lovely. And then in this photo, pod 2, that big orange blob on the map, that's where one of our main shops is located. We're basically that entire left hand, as you're looking at it, bump out, the kind of squarish part. And then we have another shop that is an old foundry just a couple blocks away. So within the, I thought I had a list of companies. Oh no, I must have hidden that. Within that community, we have video vendors, lighting vendors, pyro, staging, scenery, which is what we do. There are kind of all-in-one events companies on a more local scale that will just do everything. And think of that as local fundraisers and really big weddings where you want to pay somebody to bring legitimate production in. truck stages, those sorts of things. The company that makes the barricades to go along the front edge of the stage so that, you know, the performer gets to choose when they crowd surf as opposed to just whenever the audience chooses. That's located nearby. The Clare Brothers is the biggest live audio company in the world. They've been around since the 60s, based out of Lidditz. That's kind of where the seed of all of this is from. Tate Towers, you've probably heard of. They've got, you know, all of the automation gear in North America practically, and staff. They do a lot of staging, they do a lot of big things, and they're also starting to diversify into permanent installations, more corporate things than they were, you know, 10 years ago. So all in, just this one little town in rural Pennsylvania has, I'm gonna say, 400 to 500 people working in that industry. And it's a little bit weird to be in the middle of nowhere, Amish country, but there are other towns all over the place that do this. Nashville's round for their rock and roll production, obviously. LA, you're going to see a lot more movie work in LA. Georgia, you're going to see a lot of movie and TV work in Georgia. New York, there's a lot going on, but it's all very expensive to actually get things designed and built in New York, which is one of the reasons we exist, kind of New York adjacent. And then all over the world, for several Nike shoe launches, we wound up working with a firm out of Germany. And it's amazing, even though we don't necessarily speak same language, we're all really doing the same things. Like, they were showing up with the exact same stuff that we would have shown up with to the load in, and generally have the same attitude of the show must go on, get it loaded in, get it right. And if you can't get it right enough so that the show can happen. So that's like kind of a microcosm of our wider industry. I think the rest of this slideshow is kind of really event specific. There's like a couple of just, here's what we did for this group. And this is an activation for chronic pain awareness that we did just outside of the Oculus in Lower Manhattan. Had to make televisions that weren't waterproof. Never a great idea, just get the waterproof TVs. Nike installations and activations, they have a lot of summits that are kind of design summit, kind of convention about shoes, kind of, they always have a theme, sustainability and whatnot. This in particular, we also produced to organize all of the other vendors, the lighting vendors and the video, sound, brand ambassadors. So the people who just have clipboards and make sure that you know, you're going in the right direction, and you know where your next event is. That's all organized through production, as it were. So that's kind of like a good background to what we do. I think I can get to some of the more. Well, this is a fun design one. Again, in the Oculus, so many of these things are in the Oculus. For World Women's Day, we made this sculpture that from one direction, you're looking up at a bunch of currency from all over the world, obviously not real and oversized so that it reads in such a massive space. And then you walk around it, and from the other angle, it says pays, which is really cool. And then down below at street level, there's, you know, actual data and information. The big sculpture in the sky is to attract your attention to what is this thing happening here. And then there's a kiosk you can see just at the bottom of the screen there, where there's interactive information about pay disparity. It was Goldman Sachs that sponsored that activation, and the main topic was about pay disparity, and that especially in the developing world, raising the living wage of, or raising the wage of women to a living wage, just has all of these benefits and studies and whatnot. And I'm sure there were also brand ambassadors there to tell you about Goldman Sachs being a great company. Oh, this is the video of walking around. Isn't that fun? So fun. And of course, in the model, there's no air conditioning blowing all of the bills around. So I don't know if that'll play again, will it? Oh no, what is it doing now? Is that audio playing on your end? I hope not. Shouldn't have clicked on it. Where did note go?
The morning of October 15th, Steve and I decided we were going to get together at 8 o'clock at the judge building.
That's exciting.
I called Steve to just tell him I was running 10 minutes late because I stopped to get these documents.
Okay, so great, we're back on track. Yeah, so there wasn't any wind in the computer model from the HVAC system, and it was a surprise, but it wasn't unpleasant enough that it was a problem, because you can't really convince the Oculus to shut down their HVAC. Something about breathing. Wild Now, it's a TV show that recently got canceled due to the host saying some stupid things on Twitter. We get that a lot, but we did it for 7 seasons, and it was their most popular show on MTV for years and years. So each year there was just a different kind of theme, and in particular this TV show, the audience is sitting in the set, so everything has to be safe enough for the general public, which is really, really safe, because yeah, if they're not covered by the insurance policy, then everybody gets really bent out of shape if somebody stubs their toe. So this was just one of many seasons. One of the things I like saying in the scenery world is if it doesn't light up, it's probably not scenery. So everything you see here has like LED tape and flashing video product behind plexiglass kind of thing. That's really popular thing the last couple decades, basically since Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Everything has to light up. LifeLab was a CES trade show booth, a massive one that P&G, it was their first CES, so they wanted to like buy up half the trade show floor to show how cool the technology for the bathroom is. Very interesting stuff. There was a robotic bathroom, robotic toilet this year. Yeah, very fascinating stuff. But we had to make all these little rooms for people to have presentations in, and we have 2 days to load this in. Everything's got to look spot on because potential clients or the press are getting right up close and personal with what you're presenting. So it has to look perfect. And that's tough to ship it across the country to Las Vegas and not have any scuffs anywhere. So as opposed to, I think the next project, Global Citizens Festival, totally opposite end of the spectrum. This is a festival we do every year in Central Park. And it's on a more traditional stage. The closest audience member is 30, 40 feet away from what you're building. And on top of that, it's all about the overall look. It has very little to do with, does this scene next to the one video product look perfect? It doesn't need to. And so everything about this is, it needs to look great as a whole unit and all work, and it needs to load in really, really fast, be weatherproof, and in this case, be durable enough to be deployed once a year, every year for forever. So that's a fun one we always do. And every year they change a little thing here and there. And we've rebuilt it once, like we changed the entire thing once. But that's kind of our classical music festival. We do a lot of them. We used to do Electric Forest every year. And then there are only a handful of producers that put on music festivals. So they just call up when they want to add a new piece to Coachella or add a new part to, or do a new music festival. So yeah, I would say we do probably 15, 20 music festivals a year in a normal year. This is a really fun one. We're going to skip all the copy. So this was Samsung wanted an activation in their new Samsung store, which if you haven't heard of a Samsung store, I guess the activation didn't work very well. But they wanted to make an Apple store, but to Samsung products. And they wanted to have this really cool interactive experience where at the front of this hallway, there's a kiosk where you give them all your social media handles, so your Instagram handle and who you are on Facebook, which is terrifying on its own. But the really cool thing is you walk into this room of mirrors and screens, and everything on there is pulled from your social media account. So it's like your walking living history. And it was this really cool structure that turned into this infinity tunnel. The only thing that looks like a mirror is a real mirror, and walking on mirror is problematic if you didn't know. But just super cool. That's not a rendering, which is just amazing to me. And it came out really, really good. This is one of the things where we built it. They wanted it up for at first 1 week, and then we told them how much it cost, and then they said, okay, how about 1 month? And then at the end of that month, they said, well, we really like it. We want to do another month. And I think they wound up keeping it there for 8, 9, 10 months, something like that. Which, when you're renting some of this stuff, can be problematic, but everybody in live events kind of knows that you go with the flow. So thankfully, it's not super problematic. This is during the load in, once we finally got all the screens turned on, got to take the selfie for it. Holiday installation. So this is a poster child of, needs to be done yesterday. We built this installation in about a week and a half, and it's all individually controlled pixels, voxels, actually, volumetric pixels, that made this cloud of sticks hanging down in this shiny black room. And we had to bring in special content creators who could understand how to work with voxels so that the content program knows where each pixel is in space. So you could push a shape through the cloud of pixels, which was really, really cool. Made all sorts of really cool things. This was a fun one because it was super fast. We didn't know if we were going to get it done, which doesn't happen that often, surprisingly. And then when the store opened, this is their old flagship store, just people streamed in. And as soon as this is like their main atrium, so this thing's like 4 stories tall. As soon as people walk in, they look up, they go, wow, and every single person took out their cell phone and took a picture of it, which is exactly what Nike wants. But it's just really satisfying to see that, people think this is that cool that they need a photo of it. And that doesn't mean what it used to when you had to get it developed, but still, it stopped everybody in their tracks. And that was just super fun to see at the end of a 150-hour work week. There was a front window component of that, which is also 4 stories tall. You can kind of make out, if you look through the lettering, the box that we built in there to fit all those voxels and the control and the drive and all that stuff. Twerking bears. So this is VMA's last year, well, a year ago, I guess. Oh, now it's just on autoplay. We're at the end of the slideshow where it just cycles through this and I talk. Yeah, VMAs is always a really, really fun design packet. We do WrestleMania every year. We do a lot of wrestling shows, and I'm kind of the main contact, mostly the main contact for the wrestling shows. So I've done a lot of death cages, almost all of them. There's one left that I need to rebuild, but all the other death cages you see on professional wrestling are mine. That's my claim to fame, other than Taylor Swift's cake. But that's a whole different story. Surely something came out of my mouth that prompted some questions. So I think with, what do we have, 12 minutes until the housekeeping? Anybody got any questions? Or I've been on mute this whole time.
I have a question, if no one else does, to kick it off. I'm curious, when you're designing for something like a road show, that it's going to have to be inside and outside and stages of different dimensions. How do you take that all into account artistically and then design around it?
Yeah, oh boy, that's a whole art form. Yeah. So yeah. Thankfully, there are common practices that shortcuts designers can take to pack small and play big is what we call it. And lately that's been trending towards more lighting, because lighting is a very volumetric thing. You can play with it real time and respond to music or whatever it is. Video is the same but more expensive and requires more back end. Okay, good. That was the end of the slideshow. We can go back to faces now. We generally design things so that they roll onto a truck easily. So whatever the whole thing is, we have to break it apart into pieces that fit in semi trucks usually. Occasionally flatbeds, but that's a really big thing if it's flatbed. And we just try to be as mindful of the design as possible when breaking things apart. So if it's a circle, you want those lines, those seam lines, to respect the circle. You don't want to just break it up to fit the best Tetris game into the semi truck as possible. You want to really think through and work with the design team to make sure, however you're breaking it up, however you're adding structure to the backside or the front side if you need to, that works and is in harmony with the design, the overall aesthetic. In addition, there are a lot of products out there that literally snap together. We have some where we have modular rental products that snap together really quickly and make giant backdrops that are beautiful and gorgeous and take light well. Things taking light well are important because a lot of, depending on the sort of event, if it's really just for a live audience, then it's big colors and lots of bright lights and things. If it's for camera, a lot of what you're doing is going to be either out of focus or you're only seeing this much behind somebody's face for the most part. The wide shot, the helicopter shot, if it's a stadium show. Sometimes we do things for that specifically. 2-3 WrestleManias ago, we built an entire globe on top of the stadium. So Raymond James, which is the Super Bowl host. So where we built the city skyline for the weekend halftime show a couple weeks ago, no, that wasn't Raymond James, that was the Orange Bowl. Anyways, similar idea where on top of the 100 level, there was this big mezzanine and we had to build a giant globe. It was the main entrance for the wrestlers, but we had to build the globe in its complete shape, because there was going to be a helicopter shot and they were going to see the backside of the globes, even though no audience member could see it. The wrestlers didn't care that it was there. We still had China and India and Australia actually Australia got left off, but we had all those other countries on the backside of this 60-foot globe that was built on top of the stadium. So there's a lot of things that you have to do that either you can take shortcuts or you have to go the long way around, I guess is where I'm rambling.
Zach, we had a question come in through the chat. There's been some talk about post-COVID being a repeat of the Roaring 20s. Lots of art, lots of partying. Are you seeing, or do you see live entertainment being really in demand in the next year or two?
I think this, if I'm Nostradamus, this year is still going to be a weird year. There are producers out there who want to be at the front end of this and getting out there, getting their events going as soon as possible. And then there are those who don't think it's worth it, or they want to play the wait and see game. So this year is going to be really hit or miss, just depending on how the rest of the world is recovering from the pandemic. Once we're through that kind of stumble stage, there's a tremendous backlog of work, events that are kind of optional, but still the stakeholders in those events want them to happen. I think certain entities have not spent their budgets for live events, and that's just kind of building up in the background. And a lot of corporate firms are doing very, very well. Stock market's high at the moment, so it's kind of hard to say. If we're in a bubble and we go into another recession, then no. But at the same time, we used to say that events was one of the most recession-proof industries, because when people can't go on vacation to Disney World, they go see a concert. So live music, touring, those sorts of things in the Great Recession a couple of years ago, those all went up in production, and money came into that industry. So it's really hard to say in this case because it's so all-encompassing across the globe. But for sure, there's a lot waiting in the wings, wanting to get out there. You can guarantee most pop stars really, really want to get back on the road because A, that's how they make their money. Nobody sells records anymore. And B, they just want that notoriety of, hey, so-and-so put on a show at Radio City or whatever venue.
Aren't you kind of afraid though that they're all going to come at the same time and you're not going to be able to get them all done?
Yes, and not just that, there's going to be this crush, this onslaught of work, but also we've had some brain drain. We have non-industry staff, people who source our materials, and it's not fair to say non-industry, non-production types, support structures within all of these companies, HR people, accountants, those sort of jobs that are transferable to other industries. And they have, because if I'm an accountant working for a design firm that's not doing any live events, I can go be an accountant at the company doing stuff. So there's brain drain on the support structures. There's brain drain on people close to retirement or people who were already kind of burning out from the roller coaster that is live events. Just saying, okay, I guess this is my sign. I should exit stage left. But at the same time, we think there's a really good group of students ready to come in and answer the call, as it were, and get that work done. So yeah, we're really eager to see how bad or not that flood is.
Zach, I have a question for you. I know that budgets, clients, and changes can all completely derail a production. What is the one thing when all that's happening that you will not compromise?
Safety, always safety. One of my good friends who is the lead talent flying artist person at Tate, he's fond of saying everybody's all about the show must go on. No, it must not. Because when you're flying Pink, for example, if something goes wrong and she's suspended over the audience, that's a really bad day. The show must not go on if it is not 100% safe to do so. So that's the extreme when you're dropping pop stars onto audience members, really to be avoided. But all the way down that line is this safe to do? And we've walked away from things that we really wanted to do because it wasn't going to be safe to do them. I can't name the pop star, but somebody wanted, for an award show, they wanted their act looked to be them getting buried in a plexiglass container with one giant thing of white sand on one side, one giant thing of black sand on the other, pouring in and just burying them as they were doing the song. We really wanted to do that. It was such a cool idea. Like, everybody wanted to see that happen. But they had this idea less than a week before the show. And there was just no possible way that we were willing to take on that kind of risk with, a high profile person and say, yeah, we can do this and we can do this safely. So we said, no, we have to walk away. Ultimately, we still did something for them, but it was much less exciting. So safety. We have had shows that were almost completely done being built. We're at the 3 or 4 week mark and starting to load trucks, where the entire concept changed, and we didn't even have time to dismantle what was done. We just had to pivot immediately into building the new thing. And at that point, when it's that level of crisis, after safety is achievability. So can we get the materials we need? Can we process those materials into a thing and make it look even close to what the new idea is? So that's a lot of hard conversations about compromise. And thankfully, we have a very diverse client base, but we have a very regular repeat client base. So we have a pretty good trusting relationship with most of our clients. And if they know, we don't say no lightly. So, and we really never say no. We always say yes, but, or yes, and. So if we throw a red flag and they know we're in that kind of crisis moment, they know they need to work with us, and that we're going to do everything we can to execute the best version possible, but it has to be safe, it has to be achievable. And nobody wants a half-done show. I've seen them. They're not good. We didn't do them. Nothing more satisfying in the world than not getting a bid, so bidding on a job, not getting it, and then seeing it on TV 2-3 months later, and it's just nothing like what it was supposed to be. Whoever wound up doing it either way underbid it, or production decided they didn't have the money, or something. And what was this giant game shows are big on this. So if you ever see a game show where somebody's just sitting at a card table and there's like a banner in front of it instead of like a light up, like flashy thick acrylic desk, they didn't mean for that. They never want a card table with a banner on it. I guarantee somebody screwed up.
All right, any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, Zach, thank you again so much. Really appreciate it. I hope everybody got at least one little nugget out of there for the live experience world, and things that you can take with you. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jenny Noakes so that she can talk a little bit about our new academic program that's coming up. So Jenny, over to you.
Thank you. I also want to thank you, Zach. That was really awesome. It's like heartwarming and a little nostalgic to see images of like large crowds of people gathered for an event. I'm like counting the minutes until we can get back to that. So thank you so much. And I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the live experience design major and minor, and to answer any questions anyone has now, or to make sure that people have my contact information. So if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me and I'm happy to answer them. I'm really happy to see some familiar faces here. So this is a nice, exciting crowd of people. So the live experience design program here at the College of Art and Design was really crafted to kind of harness this the sort of combination of practical skills, cultural literacy, and like creative energy and spontaneity that Zach described in his talk. This sort of fly by the seat of your pants, make it happen, big picture thinking, along with the sort of grounded context and skill set that's necessary to actually make that stuff happen and not just imagine it. So to just talk very quickly, the curriculum is kind of divided into these three main chunks, and I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm going to admit that I am a little bit of a Zoom novice here, so give me a second. Let's see. Thank you for your patience. Whoop. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay. Whoops. It should really be full screen, which it's not. Everyone gets a picture of my desktop here. So the live experience design has this main core curriculum. And the core curriculum here, these are the classes that are included in it. And they are really designed to give you the solid grounding that you need in this wide range of necessary skill sets to succeed in live experience design as a professional. And this core curriculum, everyone who's a major will take these classes, and this is also the coursework from which the minor will pull. So you'll see here, it's got this really broad reaching practical skill sets. You've got design, physical fabrication, exploring like human sensory experiences, and then professional practices. It also pulls into some cultural literacy and some context for this. So here you'll see there's introduction to performance studies, which starts to sort of expand and explore what performance even is. And all of this is supported and grounded by this sort of general education and elective requirements in theater and music, in narrative and storytelling, all of which pulls together to give you this foundation for the creation of live experiences. The major also includes a semester-long professional internship. So you start to take these skill sets and apply them in a real world experience and understand sort of how to move from this sort of theory or introductory practice into real world application. And you'll sort of further that with a year-long senior studio, an experiential studio where you'll create a live experience, integrating all of these skills and all of these classes and all of these ideas into a real practical application. In addition to this core curriculum, students can choose an area of concentration to further dig in and explore one aspect of live experience design, because it's a huge, huge field that covers a lot of different areas and contexts. So the one track is a live performance track. This particular track focuses on skill sets and design experiences that are focused toward the creation of a live performance. So this is like costume and character design, lighting design specifically for live performance, looking into set design for stage, and the use of special effects. The other track is a designed environment track. This one is looking at the skills that are necessary for the creation of ambient or immersive environments. So this is looking at like designed environments. That course is looking at spatial design, wayfaring, safety and accessibility issues, just the creation of an ambient space that you walk through or are experiencing around you as opposed to a live performance. You've got sonic forms, lighting for design or ambient environments, and multimedia installation. So the major gives you the opportunity to kind of dig down and focus while still getting this broad sort of swath of skills that you need to enter into a professional experience design environment. I think it was really interesting today to see how much of both of these tracks were evident in the work that Zak was showing us, both from these like huge live shows and then also thinking a lot about that Samsung, you know, tunnel and this idea of sort of being in an immersive experience. So if I can get this to go, I can't. Well, there we go. So here's my name. I'm Dr. Jenny Noakes. My email address is jnoakes@pcad.edu. I'm trying to make this a real quick ad for the program. And if anyone has any questions at all about the major or the minor or the program or how it's working or what it does or what you can do with it, please feel free to reach out to me. I love to talk about it and I would love to talk to you. And that's it. Thank you everyone for coming to our inaugural LiveX speaker. And thank you so much, Zak, for taking the time out of new fatherhood, which is overwhelming, to talk about work. Thank you.
Thanks,
You're very
everyone.
welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Have a great day.
We did it.
We did do it.
I need to learn how to share my screen in Zoom.
That was great.
Did
Congratulations.
it. Todd's not really here. He texted me. He's like, I have to jump off, but I don't want to jump out. He goes, I'm afraid I'll screw something up.
Oh, Deborah, do you want to stop recording?
Oh, yeah.